Hey everybody, thanks for checking in. I got several questions over the last few months about the options for having power while you're out on the trail, while you're backpacking, while you're out hiking, while you're in camp, etc. So today we're going to look at a couple of different things. One we're going to look at are strategies for optimizing your power and or battery resources. And then we're also going to look at a variety of options for recharging devices to kind of give you a comparison of what's out there, the pros and the cons, etc. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing we'll talk about today are the kind of strategies that I use for optimizing my power/battery resources for the devices that I typically carry. This is an example of probably a very good set of things that I generally would probably have on me in terms of electronics. I'm pretty much always going to have my GPS. I'll have some kind of a light, a lantern, a flashlight, etc. I try to almost always carry a camera, and depending upon the type of backpacking trip that we're on, we may carry a set of handheld radios. Now, the one thing that all of these things have in common is the type of battery they have in them, and that would be your typical AA battery. Now, the beautiful thing about this type of strategy is that if every one of these things has the same type battery, that obviously means that you're going to have to carry less batteries in terms of backups. It also means that you have options to change batteries from one device to another depending upon how critical it is. I'll be very honest, this is probably by and far the easiest and most realistic and practical way to go about managing your battery resources or having power on the trail. But having said that, we're going to look at some of the charging options today, and I'll give you some tips, some pros and cons for each of those. Alright. So obviously, beyond just having rechargeable batteries for your devices, the next thing that the vast majority of folks are always asking about is, how do I charge my cell phone while I'm out on the trail? And obviously, I carry a cell phone when I'm out on the trail. Assuming that you do have some coverage. There's, it's an emergency communications device. Back to civilization. You can have it as a camera. So in one device, instead of perhaps a bulkier camera, you can use your cell phone as a camera. And the other option is that you can use your cell phone as a GPS. In particular, in this one, I'm running the Backpacker, I think, GPS Trails app on this. Beautiful color display, and obviously a lot bigger than this. Now, having said that, I will say that although I do carry my cell phone, I would never, unless you're just taking a hike through a park, never to rely on this as your primary navigational device. Number one, the sensitivity of the GPS receivers are just not what they are in a commercial, or I should say in a dedicated GPS type device. But more importantly is that unless you've got these things in some kind of the Rhino Morphe box, whatever it might be, it's just they're just not nearly as durable. And just in terms of a battery life, where I can go literally probably a week on this, you're talking about with almost constant use during the day, obviously you're not going to get anything like that out of a cell phone. So that's things to consider. Having said that, let's talk about some options if you are carrying a device if you are carrying your cell phone. How do you charge this? So before we actually start talking about the different charging devices, let's talk about what you have to charge. And the most critical element that you really need to understand is the battery size in the device that you're trying to charge. So it gives you a benchmark on understanding how much power and how long it takes to charge a device like this. In this case, this is a Samsung Galaxy S2, and these things have a 1650 milliamp hour battery pack in them. Its sibling, the newer S3, has a 2100 milliamp hour battery pack, and just for comparison's sake, an iPhone 4S has a 1400 milliamp hour battery pack. So the next things we'll look at is understanding the device that you're going to use to charge this is how much power it puts out in terms of watts, and in terms of watts and how many volts it puts out, so you can understand how long it would take to transfer power from one device to another. And a really key thing to understand here is that most devices like cell phones with lithium batteries with a smart charging circuit are not 100% efficient. The chargers themselves use up some of the current. So you need to roughly figure, to be conservative, about 80% efficiency. So where you might think that it would take, say, perhaps 4 or 5 hours to charge something, the reality is it would take more like 6 or 7 hours to charge something. Alright, let's look at the first one that most folks almost automatically think of, and that's a solar panel. It's about, I think this is 10 watts, and they run about $100, give or take, because of the flexible nature of them. Just a little, we'll talk about size here in just a second of the solar panels so that you can understand. So many people see these like little small solar packs that are about the size of their phone, or they fold out. I'm going to tell you right now, unless you can plug your cell phone into that thing, let it sit in direct sunlight for about a week, just forget it. It's not even worth it. It's just not happening. I like these, because I can actually roll this up. It's very durable. It's waterproof. It's easy to stick down inside the backpack. It comes out the other end. It produces 12 volts. And it's got just a standard cigarette lighter. So anything with a cigarette lighter plug can plug into here and charge up. So we'll use let's say this was like the newer one, a similar phone that most folks would have, like a Galaxy S3. We'll call it 2,000 milliamp hour battery for rounding to make it easy. So in this particular one right here, got a 10 watt, produces 12 volts. So that's about 800 milliamps true, or 800 milliamps raw. But the reality is, by the time it goes to the charging circuit, you're only getting about 600 milliamps out of that. So really easy. If I had 2,000 milliamps over here, and assuming this thing was almost completely drained, I was down to, like, I'm in the red. It's almost completely empty. How long at 600 milliamps per hour? How long will it take? Well, 3 times 6 is 18. It would take this thing in direct sunlight 3 to 4 hours to completely charge up. And that's assuming this thing is laying in the sunlight. And I have done that. I've been backpacking. I've taken this, I've laid it on top of the tent or something like that, and I've plugged it in. Now this, obviously, the strategy only works if you have a place to put this in sunlight for extended periods of time. If it's in your backpack and you don't pull it out till you get to camp in the evening, it's not going to do any good. It's not going to do any good overnight. I've seen people hang these. They got a lot of these have different kind of hooks. So they hang these on their backpack. Great if you're out in the open and it's in the sunlight, but you're moving around. It's never going to be anywhere near 100% efficiency. So that is an option. Just don't be fooled that you're gonna throw this on the ground, plug this in while you're grabbing a bite to eat over lunch. You're going to walk away with a charged cell phone. It's just not going to happen. The other thing I'll tell you about cell phones is that most phones take between about a half an amp to a full amp to charge. So that means that the device over here has got to be putting out between 500 to 1,000 milliamps, in that range. So if the supply current coming over here is below the minimum requirement, the charge control circuitry may not even work. It's kind of dependent upon the design, but it might be hit or miss dependent upon the phone, if this phone would even take a charge if the device is putting out less than half an amp. So make sure you practice this at home. It'd be a real bummer to get on the trail to find out that your phone requires maybe 700 milliamps to even charge. You go plug it in this thing, the light doesn't even light up to charge, and then that was a waste. The next one we'll look at is a power source that you create yourself in terms of hand crank. There's a lot of different versions of these. You've seen the little small radios that have a hand crank on the side of them. This particular one is a lantern that I just happen to have that you crank, and it charges the battery, and it's got LED lights in it. But it also has the USB plug in the side here that you can take this and then plug in your phone. So again, let's talk about the realities of using something like this. In theory, sounds great. Here's the reality. So here I've got this hand crank device, And if I crank this, it produces about 6 or 7 watts on average, maybe 10 watts. You know, if I'm really steady. So, you know, cranking it ultra fast isn't going to buy you any more than just slow and steady, which is going to make enough to make 5 volts. And again, if this thing is making about 7 to 10 watts at 5 volts, that means that you're really going to get about 400 or 500 milliamps out of that again. So again, let's say this is a Galaxy S3. I got 2,000 milliamps. It's dead. I got this thing over here, produces, best case scenario, 500 milliamps an hour. That means that I'm going to have to crank this thing for 4 hours to make this charge up. So you know, you're a better man than I am if you're going to sit beside your you know, while you're stopping to eat, or you're going to sit there and camp in the evening for 4 hours just to charge up your cell phone. So you know, emergency purposes, maybe, you know, again, maybe it's all you're trying to do is throw a few minutes worth of charge in here to make an emergency phone call or something. But if you're expecting to charge this thing up at the end of every day to reuse it the next day for your mapping, photographs, etc., with a device like a solar panel or like this, you know, it's just totally unrealistic. The next option we'll look at is a Biolite stove. That the primary portion of this thing here is what's called a TEG, T-E-G, or a thermoelectric generator. The concept is that this thing, there's a fire burning in here, there's a probe that's taking that heat, converting that heat to electricity, and that electricity can be plugged in via a USB port here and make power. So obviously this, the way Biolite designed these, is that, you know, there is no fuel source you know, transportable in terms of a canister. It uses available sources like wood. Now, as far as a charging device goes, while it's one of the less manually involved ones in terms of, you know, you're not cranking it, or you're not having to worry about, you know, being out in the daylight, it only produces about 2 watts on average at 5 volts continuous. So that's about 400 milliamps. Which again means that if my phone was dead, I'd have to sit here and feed this thing for about 5 hours to charge up my phone. So again, you know, while it's not labor intensive in terms of sitting there and, you know, cranking something for 4 or 5 hours, you are going to sit there for 4 or 5 hours, you know, chunking sticks into this thing to charge something up. That's the reality of something like this. Obviously, this thing is not compact, nor is it light. It's about 33 ounces, you know, a couple of pounds, you know, and it's bulky. The last thing we'll talk about in terms of having you know, additional power, which is not unlike carrying extra batteries with you, or even having extra rechargeable batteries, is having a an external rechargeable pack that you charged up before you came with you. This particular one is called it's called a CallPod fuel tank, and it's called the fuel tank Uno, U-N-O, meaning it's a singular. They make a double version of this that's twice as big or twice as much battery power, and you basically you plug it into USB, you charge it up, and then it's got it's got a pigtail that comes out for you to plug in your cell phone, or, you know, a device that you're trying to charge that'll charge, you know, that charges via USB. And again, the concept is that device that is receiving the power has to be that 5 volt USB concept. This particular one, the CallPod Uno, they're about 50 bucks, weigh about 3.5 ounces. It's a lithium ion pack, and this one runs 2200 milliamps. So, for comparison's sake, 2200 milliamps, 2100 milliamps in the Galaxy S3, pretty darn close. What that means is that it's like having one extra battery for this, meaning that if this thing's completely dead, I can plug it in, it'll charge it up just a hair over one time. You know, so there you go, one charge out of that. So capacity of these things is going to be very critical. The Duo of this, it's about 70 bucks, weighs about you know, 7.3 ounces, a little over twice as much, and it's got 4,300 milliamp capacity in it. So Again, the output in terms of time that it takes, these things output at 5 volts at 500 milliamps. It's the rate that it outputs, 500 milliamps per hour. So 2000 milliamps at 500 milliamps an hour. That means it's going to take 4 hours for these things plugged together, for this thing to charge this. So granted, there's nothing you have to do. You plug it in, throw it down, next to your sleeping bag, and you wake up the next morning and this thing's drained and this thing's full. So there's a lot of different ways, or a lot of different brands of these. Another good, you'll see the CallPod is a very popular one. Brunton, B-R-U-N-T-O-N. Brunton makes the Inspire and the Sync and a variety of others that range, starting about 3,000 or 3,200 milliamps for about $50, and they'll range all the way up to, I think the Brunton Sync is like 9,000 milliamp hours, about $130. Weighs about 12 ounces, so I don't have a sample of it here, but 12 ounces is about 3/4 of a pound, so it's a pretty good size little brick lithium ion pack. But at 9,000 milliamp hours capacity, that means that you'd charge something up like your cell phone at least 4, maybe 5 times out of it. So it's all depends upon the capacity of them. This particular one is trying to remember the brand of this one. I picked this one up. It was actually very inexpensive. This was a lithium polymer, which is just it's a different kind of lithium battery. It's very similar to lithium ion. It's just in the polymer form. They shape them a little bit differently. This particular one, I said, was 5,000 milliamp hours, so I could charge this phone up about 2.5 times, maybe a little bit more actually. Nice, compact. Most of these have a little charge status indicator. Tells you this has got 3 lights, fully charged, ready to go. It's got a USB port here on the back. Plug it in, plug that in. Smart control charging circuitry takes it. Of course, it stops feeding when it's full. So I've used this. I actually carry this one when I travel a lot. I throw it in my computer case for charging up my cell phone, in an emergency. The last thing I'll tell you for all you Apple iPhone users is that be darn sure that if you're buying one of these kinds of things, a rechargeable battery pack to recharge your iPhone, be darn sure that whatever you're buying is compatible. There have been a lot of instances where some of these kind of universal or generic chargers don't always work with the iPhone, and it just has to do with the way the charge control circuitry works in the iPhone 4S, 5, whatever. So be very sure that what you're getting. For example, you might have heard of the brand Mophie, M-O-P-H-I-E, Mophie Juice Pack, Mophie Juice Pack Pro. They've got a couple different ones. Those were specifically designed to work with iPhones. So Mophie, like a Mophie Juice Pack Pro, about 2,500 milliamps. Roughly, it looks a lot like kind of a fat cell phone. It's about the same capacity as this. At an iPhone 4S at about 1,400 milliamps. That means that you would charge. You could charge up your 4S about 1.5 times roughly. So that's something to take into consideration. So again, I ran through a lot of that pretty quickly. If you've got any question about any of these things, please don't hesitate. Drop me a line, and I really appreciate everybody watching. Thanks. Have a great 2013, and happy backpacking.